Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and we're joined by none other than Marc Z with the Marc Z Moment. As always, good to see you, my friend.
John, great being here. I hope your summer is going terrifically.
It's warm, I can tell you that. But that's a good thing. That's what we expect in the summertime. Marc, you always have some timely and topical things to discuss. What's on your mind for today?
John, I thought we'd talk about resumes today because what's happening is because it's so easy to submit a resume to an employer, a lot of times resumes are holding up the process and people are losing opportunities to be considered for positions. And then employers are considering people for positions that they shouldn't be considering. And so I thought we'd talk about what's important for somebody to produce um, a relevant resume that's going to be helpful for them and helpful to the employer.
So there's a lot to unpack there, a little bit of the do's and don'ts with creating a resume. I would imagine, and I've said this time and time again, if people are putting forth resumes that are not even riddled with that have errors, it says something about their attention to detail and the time that they spend. I mean, this is your ultimate calling card, right? If you want an opportunity. So tell us a little bit of why don't we start with the do's of resume creation and submission?
So the dues of resume submission is apply for a position that you're qualified for or could be qualified for and submit a resume that highlights your credentials and are relevant for the position. So often what's happening, which is why a lot of employers have to have pre-screens on candidates, is because they can't figure out what the person's background is on a resume. So certain candidates will submit a resume and it will be overly broad. It will include qualifications that are maybe either buried or not significant. And the employer is left trying to figure out, is this candidate qualified for a role? At the same time, what's happening is qualified candidates will see a position and what they will not do is a lot of times put together a resume that really discusses their background for the position. Their attitude is, I have one resume, I'm going to use one resume, and a lot of times that resume does not highlight their particular background. So they're losing opportunities to present themselves accurately, and employers are losing opportunities of candidates that when they look at the resume, they may discount the candidate because they're not showing the qualifications that the candidate actually has.
So, it sounds to me like you're saying a lot of people are going with that sort of plain vanilla generic resume with the hopes that that will, be a simpler process or route.
Correct.
And I think what you're saying is, make sure first off to tailor your resume to the position that you're applying for. Take the time to customize it.
Correct. Because it's so easy to submit a resume today, employers have a lot of resumes they got to go through. And what they're using a lot of times are an initial AI process and then a pre-screen if they can't figure out a resume because they may be an employer that has less employees. But it's so important that a candidate submit a resume that has their qualifications that are highlighted in a front load way versus having it distributed different parts of the resume because they're trying to do a one size fits all resume. A lot of candidates, what they'll do is they'll say, well, what I'm doing is in my cover letter, I'll change up my cover letter and I'll highlight those points. But a lot of times the cover letter and the resume get separated and the employer has a resume that's a broader resume. And if key points don't come to the forefront, they're going to discount this candidate. And a lot of times the candidate that front loads it might not be the most qualified, but they're the best qualified based on the resume submitted. So it's so important to submit a resume that discusses your qualifications. At the same time, the next thing you really want to do is have a resume that's totally accurate in terms of dates, in terms of responsibilities and in terms of the years. So sometimes what people are doing is they're doing a resume that reflects a year to year. So somebody might have worked August of 2004 to January of 2005, or August 2024 to January 2025, and it will look like they were there a year when it's significantly less time. So a lot of employers are asking for resumes that are month and date included. The other
Interesting.
thing, yeah, and
Interesting. How does that work when somebody, well, I guess it's two scenarios. One of which, you and I were probably brought up in an era where, change was not necessarily good. I think over the last couple of decades, we've seen a lot more, frequency of job change. How does that work when you've got a professional with 20 years of experience and they've had 15 roles? Do they want to detail those out? They want to put the most relevant ones? How do you account for the gaps in those years, et cetera? So, again, it's back to a very specific, not one size fits all, but I guess the flip side of that, what does somebody do if they've got 25 years in one company?
correct. I mean, first of all, a resume is an overview of your background experience. You don't have to include everything. So that's the first thing. But if you have had 15 jobs in 25 years, a lot of times it's a very good idea in the resume to explain the reason for your movement. A lot of very strong candidates might be working for a company, for example, that is in the healthcare business, or is it biopharma, or in other areas where company or technology companies that are bought and sold, and it has nothing to do with the person's performance. So that can be explained. Another thing which is really, really important, I think is really, really valuable, are candidates that have performed contract roles. So these contract roles have given them excellent experience, and they might be on the contract for 2 or 3 years. What you should say is, this is in the resume, this is a contract role. So an employer could see this person, because it may be also a 3-month contract role, and it's a valuable experience. So you should explain that in the resume so the employer does not think that you left that job after 3 months. Now, if you've been in the contract role 3 years, it's a different story. So really, the whole theme is you want to have a resume that's going to be easy to read, that focuses on the qualifications and the experience, and really is accurate in every respect. The last thing on a resume, what you want to do is, when you're submitting a resume, make sure it's brought up to date in terms of the firms or companies. So, for example, if you work for a firm, Edwards and Angel, that was years ago, if an employer is looking at them today, there's Edwards and Angel is gone, but there's now Pepper Troutman Locke, that Troutman Pepper Locke, that is the ultimate firm. Several periods later,
Successor
they're
period companies.
a
So,
successor
so would the
to the
appropriate way to do that, put the name of the firm as it was, and then in parentheses, the current firm, or vice versa?
vice versa,
Okay.
because the employer can relate to what the firm's known to today. So
Got it.
somebody can identify this is the firm and put in parentheses, formerly known as.
Yeah.
And then you
Okay.
put in what the name of the firm was when you worked for them.
Got it.
And if the firm is no longer in business, or the company is no longer in business, you should put that in there too, because the employer or prospective employer is going to be trying to contact them to get a reference, and they may not be in business, and you're trying to find out somebody who used to be with that company that could be a good reference. So you really
So,
want to be accurate in that too.
great advice. I know we could probably go on for hours about this, Mark. I think we could probably do a whole segment on AI, and search bots within resume screening. One of the things that I think I hear often people say is, I'm not even going to bother submitting to a large company because, there's tens of thousands of resumes and you never hear back, and the frustrating aspect. But where are, I think you're talking to firms that are taking the time to go through, real candidates, real applications. But I would say on the flip side also, you're saying be highly flexible and customized towards the opportunity. Don't just submit resumes blindly. I mean, we've all, screened resumes for jobs that have candidates that have no relevance to the position just because they, hit send on 100 different job ads. So where's that happy medium, I guess, for applicants and for companies searching?
So, first of all, there is a happy medium because if you feel you have enough of the qualifications for the role, if an employer is looking for 3 to 6 years and you have 7.5, 8 years, still submit your resume. If the firm is looking for, I'll give you an example. For example, as you know, one of the areas we specialize in paralegal placement. A candidate had several roles in internships while in college, really responsible roles. Well, they decided they want to be considered for a position with a major Am Law 200 law firm. That firm was looking for people with experience of at least 2 years. So they said, well, I have these different summer and during the year positions where I have some
Cumulatively, it
relevant
would be at least
experience.
a couple of years, right?
Right. And so they were considered by the firm, and the firm, once they met him, determined this is somebody who's got a lot of potential. So it got finally two live people to have a meeting, which is what your goal is, the resume goal is. And then because after that, it's meeting the person, and the firm
Absolutely.
said, this is somebody that we want to invest in. So this candidate found out yesterday that they beat out a lot of people with 2 to 3 years full-time experience because
Based on
they
their
had
cumulative
enough,
experience.
right, they had enough experience, but they had the personality and style, drive, and attitude that would make them an excellent candidate for the role. So the medium is having enough experience to be interviewed by the employer and have the skills and qualifications where they could potentially do the job.
Good stuff as always, Mark. We're going to have to leave it at that for today. If people want to get in touch with you, want to learn more, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
John, first of all, go on our wonderful Radio Entrepreneurs website, radioentrepreneurs.com. Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C and the letter Z, marczlegal.com, MarczLegal.com, and 617-338-1300.
Fantastic. This has been a Marc Z Moment with Marc Z, President of Marc Z Legal Staffing, and we'll be right back on another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.